What's up, everybody? It's Kymmy Coco, your host of Innovative Black Stations Connecting the Dots podcast. I hope everyone is doing well. We have a lot to get into today, but we have to let you know, first of all, we are being brought to you by So Mississippi Candles. I hope you guys have gotten your candles. They smell so good. There is so much to get into. I want to introduce our guest. You've seen him on the show before, and if you have not, please go back and watch a previous interview. We are going to speak today with a friend of the show and future mayor of the city of Sandy Springs, Dontaye Carter.
Oh, thank you.
First of all, I am so proud of you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
When people talk about, local government, local elections, this is what we're talking about. Somebody that is truly concerned about the citizens, the people. I know that you've seen him all over in his activism work, and you always see him with his daughter. I don't know anyone who has their daughter more than you do. She is so adorable. I just love to see you share her and with us, and watching her grow up, just a joy. She just makes everybody laugh. Husband, father, community activist. I think that he would be a great mayor for Sandy Springs, but let him tell you about himself. Dontaye,
thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. As you all heard, my name is Dontaye Carter, and I am running to be the next mayor of the city of Sandy Springs. I'm excited. I'm really I'm excited about the opportunity that Sandy Springs has right now.
Yeah.
We've seen so much going on. Last year was tough. It started off with COVID. It evolved into really exposing the injustice within our system. And I think this is the perfect opportunity for us to really start talking about what diversity, inclusion, and equity truly looks like across the board here. And not just the United States of America and Georgia, but in our local municipalities such as Sandy Springs. So I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited to bring transparency back to the table.
Absolutely.
There's so much that's going on. So many people feel like there's so many deals that are being cut behind closed doors. And I want folks to know that, once I get in office, that it's going to be different. All this taking meetings off of Facebook, it doesn't. We're putting the meetings everywhere that they need to be seen. We're going to make sure that people have access, and access on a much wider scale to see what's going on in City Hall. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I truly believe that that's exactly how it would be, only because you share so much anyway. You're just like an open book, and so
I appreciate it.
Tell us about Sandy Springs itself, because Sandy Springs is it considered a suburb of Atlanta? It's its own city, but tell us about the history of Sandy Springs.
Sandy Springs it's a beautiful place. It's filled with so much diversity, and it's changed so much over the last 5-10 years. And there are folks who've moved into the city like me with a young family, raising a young daughter, that are involved in education, that are involved in our neighborhoods, and I think what we're seeing is a call just for more diversity. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Wanting to be included more. We built this the beautiful stage and everything out there on City Green where we have concerts, but so many groups just wonder, well, what about our culture? What about the music that we love? And so really just being more intentional about bringing more people to the table so that we can hear those voices. And again, Sandy Springs isn't what it was 15, 20 years ago. It's a different city. This is a city where every precinct except one went blue last year. That most people don't realize. I mean,
in Sandy Springs?
Yes, Warnock won big, Ossoff won big, and the fact that you have these two minority men that did so well in this city, again, it just shows that Sandy Springs isn't what it used to be, and that's why I'm running. I'm running as a candidate that is going to listen to folks and is saying, we've got to really expand this electorate, and in the mayor's first race 8 years ago, only 8,000 people showed up. This is a city of 110,000 people, and I believe we can get a lot more people involved and a lot more people to the table when we start, opening up these chairs for people to sit down.
Yeah, I think so too. Sandy Springs is it's kind of in the middle of Atlanta and Roswell, Alpharetta, that area.
Yeah, like right after Buckhead to Sandy Springs.
So we're seeing a lot of redistricting.
Mm-hmm.
I know Buckhead wants to branch off again into Buckhead City?
Yeah.
Do you think that more cities in the area are going to be doing that?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that people want to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And
so any way
they feel, and we know that local government, having very local specific government, is where people feel comfortable because they know that, what, I should have access to the mayor. I should have access, and I say should because it hasn't always been that way in Sandy Springs. Right. But they should have access to these folks so that these folks can work in their best interest. Because we talk about it all the time. It's easy for us to look at the president, the vice president, and these big, powerful seats. But the reality is that our lives are most impacted on that local scale. And so those are the things that we've got to do. We've got to focus locally so that we can make the impact that we need to make statewide and across this nation.
So what are the issues that are plaguing Sandy Springs right now?
And I think this is the biggest part about being well-rounded and listening to the community. People have concerns about what's going on with Sandy Springs water. We're one of few major cities that we don't produce our own water. We get it from the city of Atlanta. I think I've heard the numbers as high as we're paying 3 times as much as many of our surrounding cities when it comes to our water bills. And so I think that that's been a big one. Another one that's been really big is transparency and accountability. One of the big points that has been discussed a lot in Sandy Springs recently has been the cultural center and the fact that we've had members of our community that have raised a ton of money to get this center off the ground, and they don't know what's going on with this center. And so these are things that I care about. These are things that for me mean something. And if you can impact one segment of our population this way, you can certainly do it to others. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why we have to be at a place of listening. You have to be transparent in what this process looks like. If this site changes, you have to be able to communicate why it's changed. You have to share those things because residents want to know. It's a whole lot easier for you to follow your house rules when you understand why the house rules are so important. Mm-hmm. And so we've really got to make sure that we are talking to our citizens and allowing them to know what's going on, and not just saying it like, oh, we're going to do this, but explaining the why. That why portion is so important. And so that's been another huge issue. And another one, of course, has been diversity and inclusion. It's one of the reasons why we formed a diversity and inclusion task force. It's one of the reasons why part of that subcommittee is housing and transportation. These things matter, but when I hear members of that task force say that they wonder what they're doing when it comes to making recommendations on housing and transportation because city government's still moving forward with their master transportation plan, that concerns me. And it concerns me heavily because, if we're going to create these task force, we have to empower them to make these recommendations and them knowing that, when we present these recommendations to you, we know that you're going to consider them heavily. Right. It's not just going to be okay, thank you for your time. This is what we're going to do moving forward. People are tired of performative, work. Yeah. And so I think it's time now that we say, okay, we have to be more than just about words. We've got to get on this action boat, right? And we've got to make some substantial change.
Absolutely. A few people here in the studio, we live in Cobb County, which is kind of neighboring Sandy Springs, and not so much in Sandy Springs, but I know in Cobb County we face these same issues. And I've noticed that there was a lot of performative kind of, let's talk about it. A few of my friends that live in Sandy Springs brought to my attention that the current mayor kind of had some talks and some internet chats and even formed a group that had a dialogue about diversity, but we're a year later have really not seen much about that.
Yeah, and I think, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, right, it's easy to look at this thing and think it's just black and white, and it really isn't.
No.
Because when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, we're talking about of different cultures. We're talking about of different religions. We're talking about economics.
Yeah.
We're talking about when it comes to our brothers and sisters that are part of the LGBTQIA community. You know what I'm saying? And so when you talk about casting this wide net and saying that we're going to work on diversity and inclusion, like, you have to be prepared for what comes along with that. And what we're seeing is that our leadership isn't. And that they're not digging into this thing as deep as they can, and that they should. And again, when I hear the concerns from members of that committee and that task force saying that they have questions about where they're going from here.
What are the action items?
Yeah,
are there any action items?
Well, are you empowering them? Because what we found is that more than 90% of our first responders can't afford to live in our city. So if they've got that number with our first responders, well, what about our teachers? My wife is an OBGYN. Her practice is right across the street from Northside. She's lost really good nurses because they can't afford to live in Sandy
area.
Springs.
Wow.
And it's not like, these folks aren't making $60,000, $70,000 a year. And if they're feeling that, and that's one of the things that the task force came up with, is that the AMI in the area is $50,000. So if we know that $50,000 is what the area median income is, what are we doing to accommodate that base?
The people that make less than.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
So is there any? Because I wouldn't think. Thinking about that area. Is there room? Do you see any way to get more low income or median income housing?
Well, and I think the thing is, people look at low income and they're automatically thinking projects
right.
And that's not what we're saying.
No.
We're talking about what the HUD standards are and what, going by the federal government, what they say people should be spending towards housing. That's what we're talking about. And so when we look at this, there's plenty of room for it. But up in Sandy Springs, we're gonna have to have some tough conversations. We're gonna have to look at zoning. We're gonna have to look at the things that directly impact creating housing affordability and ensuring that we're able to address those things, because there's always a way to do this. There's a way to have high-end living, but there's always a way to accommodate the folks that are working in our restaurants, the folks who are teaching our children, and the folks who, quite frankly, are out here saving our lives, whether it's firefighting, whether it's paramedics, EMTs, who are out here doing the work that some of us don't have the heart or the stomach to do.
Wow. What made you say, I'm going to do this? Like, what was the final straw for you?
I think the final straw was hearing, it's so funny because, and I want to start off by saying this, there's so many people that I hear, where did this guy come from? Does he live in Sandy Springs? He's an Atlanta transplant. He bought a crash pad. No, I'm a guy who's always been connected with our city government. I'm a guy who's always sat back and watched. And I just got tired of hearing the same old talk and not seeing. It just baffles my mind that we've got this water issue when our leadership spent $250 million on City Hall. Yeah. Like, it baffles my mind that I don't know,
like, why is that even happening?
Yeah. Like why,
that's your job.
Why aren't we being proactive? Why are we waiting for stuff to go wrong? This issue about the water has been an issue since 2005. It's nothing new. It's nothing new at all. And so I just think that we've got to have folks in here that are concerned about the everyday people in Sandy Springs, and I don't see that reflected.
The person that is the mayor right now, I've noticed on his website, he referenced the water issue, and he said that they needed an experienced leader to navigate through the lingering effects of the pandemic. Sandy Springs is one of the few major cities that does not control its own water supply, and yet we pay 3 times what residents of nearby cities pay and 25% more than the city of Atlanta residents who are served by the same provider. Atlanta has not invested in the Sandy Springs portion of the system, and it is deteriorating. He started the battle to control the water system. We're at a critical point. You know, I see quite a few Republicans in their campaigns promising to finish what was started. Like, why didn't you do that before?
Yeah. And, you know, I just, for me, this water issue it's a public health epidemic.
Absolutely.
And if you don't deal with it, because we're talking about, and
you see what's happening what happened in Texas.
Yeah.
I mean,
the whole grid went down.
Right.
And so, but if you're not being proactive,
right,
if you're not taking those steps, if we're not, because my thing is why are we so reliant on Atlanta? Why aren't we looking at where's the land, where's the space at in Sandy Springs, so that maybe we can build our own treatment center here?
And that makes me question, sorry to cut you off, we'll come back to that point, but that makes me question the initial plan to branch off and have this Sandy Springs anyway. Like, did you guys not know that once you became your independent city that you didn't have the things that you were getting while you were a part of Atlanta? So, like you said, when was that going to be brought up? I mean, now that you see the problem that brought on, why are you telling people, the person that's the mayor right now, why are you telling people, like, yeah, this is an issue that this should have been from the very beginning?
Yeah. And I mean, you've got it. So I live in Sandy Springs, but I get my water from Gwinnett, right? So I'm really not going to be as impacted by this. But what about those folks that live in Roswell Road, who live in apartments? You know, because that's what Sandy Springs, right? The whole foundation of this has always been homeowners versus apartments and renters. And for me, it comes down to the value of life. It's not radical to value life. It's not radical to say, you know what, I want to ensure.
Leftist.
It's not. Yeah. To ensure that everybody in my community has access. And I think, you know, when we had our charter review meeting last week, the fact that in our charter there's not the word resident or citizen referenced, right? Like,
is it what, homeowner? What does it say? Like, do you
it's
have
property? That's what it is.
Oh, okay.
You know, and it's like, but the fact that you can't even reference the individual, in my opinion, it just shows that lack of understanding the nuances of humanity. And the fact that you can say, I mean, here's the reality, right? We got to keep it 100. We can't control the lives that we inherited. I can't pick my parents. I can't pick where I'm going to go. I can't control those things. But what I can control is what I do going forward. And so to say that, you know, with the things that we can control, we're just going to control them for a small group of people and not for the whole. I mean, to me, that's just ridiculous. It's selfish. And for you to be the leader of this city and to not see the individuals who make this city work each and every day, to me, that's a failed term. Failed terms. You know, it's a failure at the highest level.
I think that personally, this is just my opinion, I've seen the failure fall like, what do you call those things? Those chips, dominoes. I've seen it fall like dominoes, from the very local government to the governor. The governor thinking that, you know, before we had enough PPE or had any idea how contagious the disease was during the pandemic, it just showed such epic failure in leadership in this state.
It's a lack of value of life. That's what it comes down to.
That's what it comes down to.
It's just a lack of acknowledging our humanity. That's what it comes down to.
That's sad.
But that's why I'm running. I'm running because the city of Sandy Springs runs each and every day because of individual people. And I want those individual voices to be heard and heard on a larger scale. It's not enough to just say we're going to work for one part of the city and not the other. It's not enough to say that we're going to look at gentrifying areas, but we don't have in place anti-displacement laws. I mean, New York and Boston all went through this. This isn't new. I'm not saying don't redevelop and bring these, but what I am saying is we got to still find a way to keep people in their homes, and it's doable. You just have to be intentional about seeing the individual.
I really want people to understand what it takes to have a heart for people. I don't think that people realize that should be something that you look for in a leader: empathy, and just a genuine care for everyone. And I personally have seen that from you, and I hope that more people pay more attention to your campaign. So before we get into anything else, tell people how to contribute to your campaign and where they can follow you.
Listen, please log on to DontayeForMayor.com. That's spelled DONTAYE for mayor.com. You'll see my platform. You'll see the issues that I'm passionate about. You'll see what I'm looking to fix in my first term. And you'll also see opportunities to donate. You'll see a campaign video which tells you, I mean, plain and simple, why I'm running for mayor. It lays it all out. And so I'm just really grateful for this opportunity, really get out and talk to the people. This is about people, on my competitor's website, you see it a lot. Experience leader. And experience is important, but if you lack empathy, if you lack compassion, that's a problem as well. And my question about the experience is, if you're bringing so much experience to the table, why are we still dealing with this water issue? If you're bringing so much experience to the table, why did it take a worldwide pandemic to expose the issues of diversity and inclusion? Like, why?
I think I'm sorry to interrupt you, but again, this is just my opinion. When people, this pandemic just showed us so much, and I just hope people were paying attention. 2020 showed us a lot.
Put it all in perspective.
2020, because when they were talking about, Georgia was the first state to open up in this whole country.
Yeah.
I don't know who thought that was a great idea. But the mayor that's the mayor of Sandy Springs right now, he was right behind Governor Kemp and saying, yeah, put them back out there.
And he was on a plane to visit Trump too. Yeah. Yeah.
So people, this is only one of what could be, I'm not going to say many, but we could very well run into another global pandemic. We could very well run into another crisis. So you kind of got to look at what the decisions that were being made by your local leadership were in those moments of adversity, and tell me what those people did.
And not only that, I would argue, look and listen to what they said in those moments.
Right.
And ask yourself, what are they doing right now? How does what they said then match up to where we are right now? Because a lot was said, but very little action was ever made.
We, as a country, we looked at things that went on. For example, we lacked PPE. The hospitals didn't have masks. The nurses didn't have PPE.
And what's in Sandy Springs? Hospital. One of the largest hospitals, Northside Hospital. And so I think it's, and I'm sorry to cut you off as well.
Yeah,
I just,
please do.
When I see this, my wife is one of those frontline workers.
Yeah.
And when I see her frustration with our government because of their inability to make decisions, we don't have time for the back and forth. We've got to be in a position to help people. This can't be about pandering.
You can't politicize a pandemic or a health crisis. That's exactly what happened.
You can't politicize our lives.
Right.
This is an opportunity to protect the people, and you've got to take that serious.
How did Sandy Springs do with COVID? Was it hit very hard? Did you guys lose a lot of people?
I know that our numbers spiked. I know that they were up. I mean, I think we were right under Atlanta for a large part of the time.
Yeah.
And so I think that we've got to. Everything's become politicized where people don't even want to wear masks. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's a problem. The fact that, you know, somebody could say, well, I'm telling you I can't breathe with my mask on, was like George Floyd saying he couldn't breathe.
Yeah, that
and it's like
was, no.
we have to let's
and
get
now
back
they're
to
comparing it to the Holocaust. Like,
let's get back to being logical about this, right?
Right.
Let's be logical and really think about what's going on, because there are reports now that even with people with the vaccinations getting COVID again. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I know there are a lot of doctors that I know through my wife, of course, but they're concerned about what later in this year looks like with COVID and us taking those proper steps. And so, I mean, we've just got to be serious about how we move and how we function with it.
We do, because even with COVID long haulers and the things that they're facing, you really have to make sure, again, that the leadership has the empathy and the concern to get people what they need, and to make sure that the federal government sent Georgia, like, I don't know, $4 billion or something, $4 million. I forgot what the number is, but when the governor gets it, make sure that your local leadership is in line to address the issues that are affecting your local community.
And think about the thing that I want people to understand too, they look at Sandy Springs and they think, oh my goodness, it's
That's
this wealthy place, it's all these rich people, but there are a lot of nonprofits up there. Nonprofits don't exist if there's not a base of people to serve. You know what I'm saying? Food pantries, everything. They don't exist unless there are people that actually need that service. And so what I'm saying is and it's not, and what I've come to realize too is, you know, so many of the pantries up in the North Fulton area, I mean, there were periods where they were just, I mean, empty. Their shelves were running empty.
Wow.
You know, and people are like, well, how is that happening? Well, you know, guess what? You know, these folks that had great jobs, that never thought their jobs were going anywhere, and then all of a sudden this pandemic hits, and next thing they know, they're in lines with people they didn't even realize.
Yeah.
You never know. And so, and that's where that empathy component comes in. Like, it's not enough to say, well, I have the experience to do X, Y, and Z. What does your empathy resume look like? What does that look like? What does your service look like? I'm not talking about the pictures you take. I'm talking about what you're actually doing.
Or the performative,
yeah.
You know, everyone's talking about Black Lives Matter. What do you guys think? Oh, yeah. Great. And then do nothing about it.
Yeah, we have to be real about where this thing is headed, because if we don't get people who are intelligent, who are thoughtful, who are compassionate, who are empathetic, if we don't get those people in office, I mean, we all saw what happened in 2008. We all see what's going around right now. This isn't a secret. If you think the real estate folks aren't talking about what this bottom looks like, they're having these discussions.
Because Sandy Springs, one of the largest office complexes in the area, is right there by Georgia 400. That's considered Sandy Springs. Right?
Yeah, we got the King
Towers.
and Queen belt. Yeah,
I call them the Twin Towers. The King and Queen building. So again, people working from home.
Yeah.
What is that going to do? We still haven't seen the impact of what that's going to do to real estate.
Yeah.
Because if people are working from home, what is that going to
do?
Commercial
real estate is feeling it though. They're feeling it. I mean, I work with a lot of attorneys.
Yeah.
I know a lot of them have downsized. What this pandemic showed us is all this space we thought we needed, we really don't. So now you've got people down. Like, there's so many ebbs and flows to this thing. And again, if you don't have the people in place that understand that, where does that leave us? I mean, all this development, if we know that AMI is $50,000 in Sandy Springs, if that's what the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force said, this is what we need to be going by, because that's what they said. This is what we need to be going by. But we're building apartments and condos and starting rent off at $3,000. Like,
that shuts a lot of people out.
And where does that leave us? And once you displace them, where do we relocate them to? Like, it's not about being against real estate. It's what this is about being compassionate about the people who live in our communities, who've made this community work for the last 16 years. They're right there.
So if the people, what does the police force in Sandy Springs look like? Are they people that live there, or are they people that coming from?
I think last time I checked, I need to go back and look at the numbers, but very few of them.
They can't afford to live there, probably.
They either can't afford to live there or they choose not to live there. And if they're choosing not to live there, it's probably because of expenses as well. And so I think that, again, we have to have a hard conversation about what this looks like. We've got, there are ways of making this thing work. We've seen it in New York. We've seen it in Boston. And I think that we've really got to ensure that we're taking time to be empathetic and compassionate when it comes to our community.
So, what is the mayor? I'm calling you the governor already. What is the mayor of Sandy Springs? What does being the mayor of Sandy Springs look like for you? What was a day as a mayor look like for you?
For me, it looks like really addressing many of these issues that I've been speaking about. It's about ensuring, it's one thing to say that we have an equitable police and force and firefighter force, because a lot of people get upset when we bring this stuff up, but we have to be honest about the history of everything.
Yeah,
we have to be honest, because if we're not honest about it, we can't really fix it. And what I'm saying is we have to be honest about it. We've got to say, we've got to be more equitable. And what is that? That starts with ensuring that the same way we're teaching our officers, they're getting all the gun training and how to detain someone training. The same way that they're getting all those training and how to identify if somebody's a threat or not, we have to make sure that we're very crystal clear on ensuring that those things cross color barriers as well.
Right. Because
what we're seeing is that they don't always cross those color barriers. And I live in a very diverse neighborhood. My neighbors to my right, their young white daughters are just as important to me as the 3 black boys that live next door to me. You know, and we've got to be more intentional about ensuring that that our police forces understand that.
Right.
Because people say, well, Sandy Springs doesn't have those issues. Well, I've spoken to neighbors. I've spoken to people all across the city that would beg to differ. And I think we've got to be crystal clear again about ensuring that that people can take ownership in this city. And I think the small loud minority that have continued to run things have been able to run it by excluding people.
Yeah.
And me saying be more inclusive is to them almost a threat to everything they have going on. But what I'm saying is we have to be.
But the demographics are changing, and you can't ignore that.
Vastly.
You cannot ignore that.
We don't have term limits. They don't. It's so funny how I can listen to them in these charter meetings talk about not wanting to raise the salaries of the mayor and council members, but in the same breath not capping term limits. You know what I'm saying? So
you just want them to make the same amount of money forever, or however many times?
Well, it benefits people who can afford to work this part-time position is what happens.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so for people who can't afford, if I'm living paycheck to paycheck, well, I wouldn't be able to afford to run for mayor. You know what I'm saying? But if I've got that additional capital, if I'm not worried about where money is coming from, it's a whole lot easier to run for this seat and stay in this seat than it would be anybody else. And my issue is, I think there need to be term limits, and I think you got to cap it. We had a council member that stepped up and he called himself the conscience of Sandy Springs. And I'm like
John Lewis.
Yeah, but what part of Sandy Springs are you talking about? Are you seeing Sandy Springs for what it is, or what you wanted it to be?
What's the history of Sandy Springs? Historically, has it always been a majority of wealthy people? Is it just now starting to change, or?
Well, I think what people have got to realize is they use and I'm going to use their terms because it's always been a homeowners versus apartments, right? It was the Fulton County zoning for all these apartments to be up here, and folks worried about their property values and all these things. And look, the reality is we just got to be compassionate. There's a history in the United States of America that's embedded in our city government and our state government. And if we're not intentional about ensuring that the laws that govern our lands and our cities is more inclusive and more equitable, then we can't really change anything. It doesn't matter if you go from, the mayor to Dontaye, because if we're not being instrumental in changing things, where does that leave us?
Right.
We have to remember that, for hundreds of years, laws were being written without the perspective of women and without the perspective of Black and brown people. And so we've got a lot of laws on the books that aren't of great benefit. And some folks argue, oh, well, they're not enforced or this or that. Listen, it's not about whether or not they're enforced. They're still on the books, and that's a problem. And if we're really trying to work towards a more just society, because when I read the Constitution, first 3 words are "we the people," right? And that first sentence, it gets to justice. Like, our founding fathers understood what the people needed in order for this society to work. And what I'm saying is that we've got to, because listen, if the Constitution was a perfect document, we wouldn't have amendments.
So many amendments.
We wouldn't have so many amendments.
Yeah.
It's not. And so we've got to have people in our local governments, in our state governments, who understand that and who are ready to do some real work.
Do you see anything in the new voting law that will become a hurdle for your campaign?
Oh, I see a whole lot that's going to become a hurdle. A whole lot.
For your campaign?
Yeah. I think, and I've joked with friends, and I've told them I'm going to sound the alarm about the impact of voter suppression early, and I am. That law was written to keep people like me out of this seat.
Yeah.
And so, the
or
fact
any
that
seat in the local,
or any seat,
yeah.
and the fact that you want to criminalize giving somebody water, you know what I'm saying? Giving somebody snacks. Criminalize it. You got to think about the impact of that. And so, we're going to sound those alarms. We're going to get people working. My hope is that people will get out. They'll get out early. They will fight to avoid these long lines, because we already know they're going to use this system to benefit the incumbent and ensure that he retains that seat. This isn't just, what people got to understand, where a majority of the businesses located. They're not in Atlanta. They're up 400. They're in Sandy Springs.
That's why this traffic is so bad.
Yeah. And so
that's where everybody works. That's where the majority of the companies are.
Sandy Springs' population doubles every day. It's only 110,000 residents, and it shoots up to 220,000 because of traffic and people coming into the city. One of the best ways to fix transportation is to start working on housing affordability and making this. There's no reason why we've got some of the nation's largest corporations in Sandy Springs, and some of their employees can't afford to live in the city. That's ridiculous. We talk about walkable communities. It's easier to create walkable communities when you've got people who can afford to live in your city that are already working there.
I really want people to understand that, because you shouldn't create a scenario where you have to expand the highway every 5 years.
Yeah, you've just got. We're behind in housing development, right? And it was so funny. I sat down with another local leader, and she made a good point. She said they're able to do this because we're not addressing the laws that make this process more equitable. The minute you start addressing the laws to make this more equitable, it becomes a much more equitable process. The reality is real estate guys are going to make money regardless.
Right. Regardless.
Yeah.
No matter what they have to do.
If we make this process more equitable, they're going to find a way to make money in that system as well. And what I'm saying is we've just got to be more intentional about it. If you want to build housing that meets the needs of everybody, you got to start with looking at the AMI, start with looking at zoning. How? What do we need? Really bringing in people that have an eye for what folks. And again, we're not talking about, they want to make this about low income and projects. Listen, we just want people that work in our city to have that opportunity to actually live in our city.
I think there was so much performative action that went on, not only toward the racial issues and, you know, the police brutality issues, but also for like healthcare workers. You know, everybody was banging pots and turning their lights on at a certain time when all this was going on. But what are we doing? What are we doing? Are we putting people in place and leadership in place that's going to make sure that we have what we need, that's going to put the pressure on the governor, that's going to put the pressure on the president? Like, it's going to have to start.
Yeah, because and we talked a lot earlier about politicizing, right? So the CDC comes out and says, hey, y'all don't have to wear masks anymore. But Northside Hospital says you got to wear masks coming into this hospital. You still got to wear masks. So where's the discrepancy? If even within the medical
themselves
industry, they've got questions and they're skeptical. Like, what should our city government really be doing? And if there is this expected explosion of COVID that's going to happen at the end of the year again, what are we doing in preparation for that? Last year, it literally shut down everybody's business. And I'm not saying people didn't get back up and working, because they did, but it left folks in limbo for some time. What are we doing to make this an easier process next time? Because
without having any preparation, the governor opened everything back up and just said, and to me, that was just like so scary.
Yeah.
That was very scary for me, because people felt like, okay, I have to go back to work.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to risk getting COVID without a general, really basic understanding about what was going on, because it took maybe 3 months before the governor of the state of Georgia said, hey, guess what, guys? This disease is airborne.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is if you're going to tell people they got to stay home, you got to make it convenient for them to be home. You got to look at the things, and you know, me being a student of history, of government, looking across the board, seeing what other countries were doing to make it more convenient.
Right.
You know, I think
there were other ways.
There were other ways.
Yeah.
There were a whole lot of other ways.
Yes.
And we could have made this much easier on our citizens.
We sure could have.
And we didn't. We allowed the dollar to drive us in other areas, and what we saw is it didn't benefit people.
We allowed the dollar to put a lot of people in a position where they had to risk their lives.
Risk their lives. Not just risk their lives, but how many people have died?
Gave their lives.
How many people's lives?
Because they were being led by a government that was just hell-bent on not using their unemployment stash to pay people.
Yeah, and I think that's where we got to get to, because all of this stuff that they're talking about, it's like, oh well, we're gonna give this amount of money to this person. Listen, the reality is we know the money doesn't trickle down. It's never trickled down.
It's trickle down economics.
It doesn't
never
work.
Worked.
But what we do know is that it does trickle up. And I think that
if we didn't know that then, please, people, know that now, because we see all the power is in the people. I know that that's like a term that became, synonymous with the Black Panther Party, but it's true. Like you really see that the essential workers were pushing this economy, were pushing this country, and the only reason why so many things changed is because they realized, hey, nothing works if they don't work.
Yeah.
But when they put that bill together, they still didn't raise the minimum wage, which I think.
But housing costs continues to increase.
But so and those are all things that local governments.
Yeah, and again, we can't keep saying, because the reality is I know people who have PhDs that still aren't getting the same opportunities as folks with just bachelor degrees. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And so we can't make this a whole, well, I went to school, I got a degree, I did. No. It all comes down to opportunity. And if we're going to talk about opportunity, then we got to go back into the history of this country and how certain folks got those opportunities. And so it's going to take some work. We got some work to do.
We saw that some people didn't necessarily go to school and do their exams and do their work to get their degree. No matter what we try to hide, the truth always shows itself.
Yeah.
In some way or another. We saw that with one of the actresses, I can't remember her name, a couple of the actresses that were actually paying for their children to get degrees.
Go to these big schools and all these things.
We saw that when the pandemic happened. The nurses and the doctors did not have what they needed. But you know who had what they needed? The police.
Yeah.
Like, we have to understand that things need to...
Yeah.
We need to rearrange the money. We need the people in place that understand, hey, you know, we probably should take some funding away from this and move it to here, or talk to this person about that. And that's where the empathy and leadership comes in.
And I think we also have to understand, right, that criminal justice is big business. It's big business. You know, all them speeding tickets.
Yeah, I mean, housing. You can't get an apartment if you have a felony. You can't get a job. You can't... It's big business, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in Sandy Springs, they've privatized probation. I'm like, huh?
Really?
Yeah, probation is privatized.
And you have to pay.
Yes.
Monthly or something.
Yes. You see what I'm saying? And so it's like when you sit back and look at this system, it's like, no, there not only is there another way, but there is a better way. And we've really got to help people to see that and understand it, because the more that we continue to go down this path, the more that's going to impact a lot of people. And, you know...
and it may not... And people that are listening, and people that feel like, just like you said earlier, you said something like this, you know, it may not impact you now.
Yeah.
But keep living.
Yeah. Well, it's you never know when it's going to hit you.
You never know.
And we got to... And, you know, I was listening to a speaker yesterday, and he was talking about how, you know, democracy was birthed out of rebellion.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
yeah.
We saw how a king was taking advantage of the 13 colonies here, and they banded together and they said no more.
No more, yeah.
And what I am saying is this is one of few countries where every 2 to 4 years you have a chance to overthrow. This is our opportunity to rebel and say no more. This is our opportunity to rebel. This is our opportunity to say, you know what y'all are doing to us isn't working. You know,
and we see what you're doing now.
We see what you're doing.
It's so very obvious.
Yeah.
And how these people pay attention. If you see how the Trump organization is now being investigated for its criminal activity, and you see that this was all like a big game for him, but how he strategically placed people in these states and in these cities to try to keep up that rhetoric. You know, all the people that were for him and what he was doing, they're still here. Yeah. They're still lingering around. We have Marjorie Taylor Greene up state somewhere. We have all these people that are just in these towns and in these cities. You have to get rid of all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to make sure, because, and you know, some of my opponent's fans, they love this line, but you know, the newspaper quoted me with saying, you know, we don't just need a diversity in pigmentation, but an actual diversity of thought. And they were like, oh. But my point is
so real.
Like,
is so real.
You need somebody who is empathetic.
Yeah.
Like, and if you find a white person or a Hispanic person that is empathetic, put them in office. Put them in office.
But that's definitely a trait that you should find in your leader.
Yeah. Yeah. Put them. We need, listen. We hear this term about experience a lot. What type of experience in running the country did our forefathers have?
None. They just made it work.
You find a way to make it work. Mm-hmm. And what I'm saying is right now what we're doing doesn't work. So we got to find another way. So if we're running around going down resumes to see who's qualified, look, I'll take one person that cares about what's going on every day of the week, because I'd rather them wrestle with their heart and ensuring that people are taken care of than sitting over here running around trying to appease people who are just a very loud minority. And that's just the reality.
Absolutely. Oh, my gosh. Whew. I mean, I really just want people to understand, and I hope they're listening and they see that you are truly, truly, truly a compassionate person. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate it. I've seen it. I've seen you spring into action to help whoever needs it. I've seen you in the rain, sleet, and snow, just stepping up to help whoever needs help and just be a voice for the voiceless. So I wish you all the best of luck.
I appreciate it.
Would love to help out in any way that I can with your campaign. Jay Black, did you want to ask him anything about the campaign?
Nah, I'm definitely my well wishes to you.
I appreciate it,
you
brother.
know, like I say, like I echo what Kim just said. You know, as far as the person you are,
Yeah.
we've seen you come a couple times, and you know, it's always been good energy. You always seem to be a man of your word. So
I appreciate
Absolutely.
it, brother.
So how do we get younger people engaged in this?
I mean, we got to put them to work. You know, they say young people don't vote. My question is, why don't young people vote? You know, why don't they turn out? They don't turn out because they feel excluded from the system. We got to get them engaged. You know, the same way we do. We go out of our way to get our seniors to the polls. Why? Because we know they're gonna vote. Well, why do we know that they're gonna vote? Because they're invested in their retirement plans. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
They're invested in ensuring that whether it's Medicaid, whatever option it is, that they've got access to those things. And what I'm saying is that when the young people feel as though they're a part of this system, they're going to get involved, and we're going to show them that, because we're going to get out, we're going to touch them, we're going to let them know that I'm just as much their mayor as anybody else's, and we're gonna fight for that, and we're gonna let them know that their voice matters here. You know, that's the one question that all these folks keep asking me: what are we gonna do about the young folks? What are we gonna do here? What are we gonna do? Listen, y'all. We gotta let them know that they're a part of this as well. Y'all are still, by y'all saying young folks like that, y'all letting them know, like, hey, I mean, you're using that those lingos that make them feel as though they're not a part of the system, and they very much are. And so we're gonna have to meet them where they are. We're gonna have to let them know how they impact the system, because we need them.
Yeah,
there's no
we
reason
definitely do.
why our young people can go to fight war. You know what I'm saying? But they feel like they can't come in here and fight at the ballot and put their votes in. And again, when people feel unseen and unheard, they don't show up. And what I'm saying is, I don't just want y'all showing up. I want y'all pulling up, because your voices matter.
One of the things that we were talking about, another issue that was going on in that area, was the Frank exhibit.
Mm-hmm. The cultural center.
Yeah.
And they're going to move the Anne Frank exhibit into that. Yeah, and there were a lot of promises that were made.
So it's been going on since 2005?
No. It hasn't been going on that long. So what happened is, the first mayor of Sandy Springs wanted the center here. I know it's one of the ones that is a part of the I can't it's skipping my mind right now. It's the
where it's going to be?
No. Well, the state was working on figuring out. There's been a big push to get it in Sandy Springs. The mayor said that he would make it happen. But the problem has been the process. That's been the biggest issue, is the process, how things are being done. Where would the center be located? There are a whole lot of issues when it comes to transparency on there.
Oh, yeah. Because I'm reading now, and it says that there were plans to move the exhibit from Roswell Road to one of 3 locations in Sandy Springs.
Yeah.
And the Sandy Springs City Council's meeting.
People exploded.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They exploded. Again, and that's because it's not a very transparent process.
Some of the residents who spoke at the meeting said that they respect the Holocaust and its impact on the world. The city may not need its own Frank exhibit, given that similar exhibits are already in place at William Brennan Jewish Heritage Museum in Midtown and Kennesaw State University. So I guess people are going back and forth about whether they want to have it.
Yeah, I think the reality is nobody is against is against a center to educate on what happened in the Holocaust, because what happened was extremely devastating. Yeah. You need to know. You got to educate your kids on it. And again, I think the biggest problem is the process. It's the process and how we got to where we are, and being transparent about how we got to where we are. It's not enough to say, oh, we're in the beginning stages, we're evaluating this, we're evaluating that. No, it's you gotta give people more.
Yeah, there's a lot of money here.
Yeah.
Being tossed around and discussed, and people are just concerned about where it's going and what's going to happen with that. So yeah, I wish you guys the best with that, because it looks like it's going to be really nice.
Oh, it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be state of the art. One of the ones that they're featuring in there, which I'm really excited about, is one of the Army photographers that captured it.
Wow!
It was a black photographer from Georgia, black male photographer from Georgia. Documented all that, came back, participated in the civil rights movement. So, man, I'm extremely honored to see that part. It really shows how inclusive they're trying to be when it comes to this center and incorporating various different aspects. And so, again, you know, I don't think anybody should be against it. I think my issue, which is the issue that many people have, is transparency. It's like, listen, just be transparent. And if you made a mistake, say you made a mistake. Like, come out and say it. Like, the fact that folks have to literally sign up to come in here and voice their concerns because you're not giving them the information needed, there's a problem. And for you to be the CEO of this city and have these problems, you know, for me, it was always easy for me to heed the warnings and the instruction from my parents when I knew why.
Right.
And I think people can be a whole lot more willing to cooperate with you when they know what's going on. When you know why. When you know what's going on.
It's going.
And
absolutely.
And the fact that we don't know those things. We don't know the ins and outs. We know there are all these blind spots around this issue. And I think that, you know, that's when we talk about transparency, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about being upright. You know, it's a lot.
It's a lot. But listen, tell people again how to contribute to your campaign, how to read more about you.
Yeah, so you can go to DontayeForMayor.com. Again, that's DONTAYE for mayor.com. You can Google me. There have been several articles. We've gotten some really good write-ups in the newspaper. We just did an interview with CNN that I'm looking forward to coming out. And, you know, I'm excited about where we are. I'm really
so excited for you, yeah.
I'm excited about the opportunity. And again, we're going to fight for not just diversity and inclusion, but equity. And making sure we keep hearing these words with reimagine this, reimagine. We're going to be reimagining a lot because diversity and inclusion, as it's stated, I mean, you know, I tell people this a lot. Diversity and inclusion is an illusion if you're not talking about equity.
It should be a verb.
Yeah.
You should be showing people that you mean, when you mean equity and inclusion, show me what you mean by equity and inclusion. Yeah. Because like you said, we need a diversity of thought. Yeah, complete thought. I think people have gotten into the mind frame that this is the mayor, this is the governor, and this is who it's going to be. And next time I vote, I'm just going to keep voting for the same people, and I'm just going to keep doing this because this is the person that I know and this is the name I recognize. That has to stop. Yeah. Because then you get into a place where people are lazy in their campaigning, lazy in their work, and they don't put in the effort to, you know, show that they really are concerned about diversity and inclusion. Because you know what, they don't have to be. Yeah.
It's true. Oh, and the group that I was talking is the Georgia Holocaust Commission on the state side, and so they raised the $3 million to get everything up and running. So I think they've Hopefully. Got cash on hand, and they've got a bunch of pledges. I saw the presentation. Again, it's a beautiful presentation, state of the art, and I think it speaks to. I mean, again, if the city government can do this to this group of very well-intentioned people, very well-intentioned, want to talk about equity, want to talk about inclusion, if they can do that to them, what happens to the other Sandy Springs residents? What happens to anybody else?
Because if I lived in Sandy Springs, personally, myself, and I saw that, I would say, hey, let's educate people on the lynchings that went on in Georgia. Let's educate people on...
Well, it opens it, and again, that's why I said we have to look at the history of these things, because it opens up the door for us to really start having conversations in context. And again, if
we can have conversations in context.
If our city government is doing this, I mean, like, where does that leave any of us, anybody else? You know, and I think that's the big thing that people got to understand, you know. And I think Dr. King said it best. You know, we're all interconnected. Whatever happens to one group is going to happen to the next. Yeah, and so we have to ensure that we stand against injustice and lack of transparency on all facets.
I believe that. And I believe in you.
Oh, thank you so much.
I want you guys to follow him, contribute to his campaign. If you have anything else going on, please let us know. And please come back and talk to us.
I will. You know,
the more that comes up.
You know, when I launched my campaign, I launched it at a protest outside of the state capitol. You know, like when I said, y'all, I'm running, that's where I made that big announcement. You know, and for me, it's about always being about the people and for the people. And, you know, it's platforms like yours that keep us dialed in and connected to the people. And I think it's important and imperative that we ensure that we continue this open dialogue and this conversation. Because
we should. If you guys have any questions, let us know. We'll communicate them with him, and we'll save them for our next conversation here on the show. The mayor of Atlanta has announced that she's not running again, so that is another position that's going to be open. So hopefully we'll have some of those candidates here. And again, if you have any questions, or if you need to know something, or you want to address something with any of the candidates, let us know, and we'll have this open conversation. That's what we're here for. So make sure you follow us, CTD_ATL on Instagram. Make sure you follow InnovativeBlackStation.com, and make sure you follow the future mayor of Sandy Springs,
Thank you so much.
Dontaye Carter. So we'll see you guys next week, and I hope that you have a great week. Peace.